Let's practice our divisibility rules together. For each of the given numbers, we're going to try to see if we can divide them by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 without using long division. Alrighty, let's start with the number 48, and let's start with the easiest ones as possible here. So, is 48 divisible by 1? Well, yes, because every number is divisible by 1 that's on this list here. Okay, another thing we want to try out is, can we divide it by 5 or 10? Because those ones are kind of easier to do. So we're going to go ahead and check out this 5 or 10 here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to just go ahead and see, does this end in 5 or 0? So just take a look at the last number. It doesn't end in 5 or 0, so 5's not going to work, okay? And it doesn't end in 0, so 10's not going to work. So I'm just going to X those ones out together. It's usually easier to do those ones together, okay? The next thing that we like checking for right away is it divisible by 2? And so to check to see if it's divisible by 2, what we're going to do is just check the last digit. This is an 8. That's an even number. So that means the answer is yes, you can divide it by 2. All right, half of 48, if you take half of 40, that's 20. Half of 8 is 4, so that's going to be 24. And while you're doing the 2, you should keep going and try 4 and 8 together because they're kind of connected. So does 24 end in an even number? If 24 ends in an even number, which 4 is, then you can take half of it, that would be 12. So it is divisible by 4 also. And while you're doing 2 and 4, you should always do 8 afterwards. So can you take half of 12? Is 12 an even number? And yes, half of 12 is 6. So if you could take half of the number 3 times, then 2, 4, and 8 all work, okay? Next, we're going to go ahead and check the rules for 3 and 9. So for 3 and 9, just add the digits. So 4 plus 8 is going to be 12. You just add the numbers together. And 3 does go into 12 evenly, so check it off. Does 9 go into 12 evenly? And 9 does not go in evenly, so 9 does not work. Okay. Now, when we go ahead and try 6 and 7, just keep in mind that for 6, this one goes off of 2 and 3. So if 2 and 3 both work, then 6 must also work. So we can go ahead and check off 6 here just because 2 and 3 both work, okay? And finally, we have the 7. So hopefully you know 7 times 7 is 49, and 49 is 1 off, so it's not going to work. But also the rule is if you double the last number of 8, 8 times 2 is 16, and you do 4 minus that number, you're not going to get a multiple of 7. So 4 minus 16 is going to be negative 12, and that is not a multiple of 7. So we're going to go ahead and put an X through the 7 here. For 57, it is divisible by 1, right? 1's going to go into that evenly. Then we should go ahead and check our 5 and 10. So the last number here is going to be 7. So 7 is not 5 or 0, so 5 is going to fail. And it doesn't end in 0, so 10 is going to fail. Let's just get those out of the way, okay? Next, what we're going to do is check 2, 4, and 8. So notice how the last number is 7, which is odd, so 2 fails. But if 2 fails, 4 fails, and 8 fails, okay? So 2 is kind of the gatekeeper for 4 and 8, okay? Next, we should check to see if it is divisible by 3. So to check to see if it's divisible by 3 and 9, remember you can add the digits, so 5 plus 7 is going to be 12. So this was actually the same sum as the first number, so 12 is a multiple of 3, but 12 is not a multiple of 9, so let's get rid of that. Remember that our 6 depends on 2 and 3, so see how 2 and 3 both don't work, 2 fails, which means that 6 is going to fail, okay? Finally, let's take a look at 7. What we're going to do for 7 is double the last digit, which is 7, so 7 times 2 is 14, and so 5 minus 14 is going to be negative 9, and that is not a multiple of 7, so this is going to fail, okay? So again, you'll get used to that rule as you practice it a little bit more. For 64, for this next one, it is divisible by 1. Let's check to see the last digit. The last digit is 4. So is that 5 or 0? No, 5 fails, 10 fails. Last digit is a 4, so it's even, so you can take half of 64. Half of 64 is 32, so that one does work. Now 32 is an even number, so you can take half of that again, so that's going to work. Half of 32 happens to be 16. Now 16 is still an even number, which means that you can do 8. Half of 16 is going to be 8. So again, the rules for 2, 4, and 8 is if you can keep dividing it by 2 3 times. Okay. Next, what we like to do is check the rule for 3 and 9. So let's go ahead and add this 6 and 4 together. So 6 plus 4 equals 10. 10 is not a multiple of 3, doesn't go in evenly, and 10 is not a multiple of 9, doesn't go in evenly. Now to check for 6, well 2 and 3 both have to work, but they do not. So because 3 fails, 6 must fail. Now for 7, let's go ahead and double the last digit of 4. So 4 times 2 is 8. 6 minus the 8 is -2. -2 is definitely not a multiple of 7, so that's going to fail. For 51, it is divisible by 1. 1 goes in evenly. Okay, now let's check the last digit, which is 1. That's not 5 or 0, so 5 is going to fail, and 10 is going to fail. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and try our 2, 4, and 8. Those ones all kind of get paired together. The last digit here is a 1, so that's odd. If it's odd, 2 fails, then 4 fails, then 8 fails. Moving on to divisible by 3 and 9. Let's go ahead and add 5 plus 1. That's going to be 6. Is 6 a multiple of 3? It is, so 6 is going to be is going to work here, right? Because that's 3 times 2 is 6. 6 is not a multiple of 9, so cross that one out. Now, do 2 and 3 both work? No, 2 failed. That means 6 must fail automatically. And let's check out 7. Well, for 7, what do we have to do? We have to double the last digit, double the 1, which is 2. 5 minus 2 is going to be 3. 3 is not a multiple of 7. For 96, 1 is definitely going to work. Let's check the last digit. The last digit is going to be a 6. That isn't 5 or 0, so it fails for 5, and it's not 0, so it fails for 10. The last digit is an even number, so we know 2 is going to work. Now, half of 90 is 45, and half of 6 is 3, so 45 plus 3 is going to be 48. Okay, so that means that's half of it. And 48 is still an even number, so you can divide it in half again. Half of 48 is 24. And 24 is still an even number, so that means you can take half of it again, and that's going to be 12. Okay, so get in the habit of trying to do that. That's pretty important, okay? For the divisible by 3 and 9, let's add 6 plus 9. That's going to be 15. Now, does 3 go into 15? Well, yeah, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, so that works. But 9 doesn't go into 15, so get rid of the 9 here, okay? Here we can see that 2 and 3 both work, which means that 6 is going to work for this one, so we can check off 6. For 7, we go ahead and double the 6, and you double the 6, that's 12. 9 minus 12 is going to be -3, and -3 is definitely not a multiple of 7, so that one's not going to work. 7's not having any luck. Either is 5 or 10 so far. For 45, that is divisible by 1. Okay, does it end in a 5 or a 0? Well, it ends in a 5, so finally this 5 gets 1, okay? But it doesn't end in 0, so 10 still has no luck here. All right, now let's go ahead and check for our 2, 4, and 8. Now 5 is an odd number, so 2 fails, 4 fails, 8 fails. Okay, so if it's odd, the 2, 4, and 8 are all going to fail. Let's go ahead and see what else we can say here. For 3 and 9, let's add 4 plus 5. 4 plus 5 is equal to 9. 9 is a multiple of 3, 3, 6, 9, and 9 is a multiple of 9. So that's going to work for 9 for the first time, okay? If we notice here that 2 failed, but 3 worked, which means that 6 is going to fail automatically. And then if you check for 7, double the 5, which is 10, then 4 minus the 10 is -6. That fails, okay? That's not a multiple of 7. All right, next one is going to be 78. Yes, it's divisible by 1. Does it end in 5 or 0? That's an 8, so that's not 5 and it's not 0. So 5 fails and 10 fails. Then we can go ahead and see, okay, does it end in an even number? And yes, 8's an even number, so 2 works. Half of 70 is 35, and half of 8 is 4. 35 plus 4 is going to be 39. So you can see here that this is now an odd number because 9 is an odd number. So you can't take half of 9 and get a whole number, so 4 fails and 8 fails. Okay. Moving on here, we can go ahead and check for 3 and 9. So what's 7 plus 8? 7 plus 8 is going to be 15. 15 is a multiple of 3, 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. But 15 is not a multiple of 9. Okay. For 6, let's go ahead and see. Well, 2 and 3 both passed, so 6 is going to pass here. Okay, so that's kind of nice. And then for 7, if we double the 8, that's 16. Then 7 minus 16 is -9. That is not a multiple of 7. Okay. This next one is 111. Well, yes, you can divide it into one group. That is definitely doable. Then we check the last digit. The last digit's a 1. Is that 5 or 0? No, it's not 5 and it's not 0, so 10 also fails. The last digit's a 1, which is odd. So if it's odd, 2 fails, 4 fails, and 8 fails. we can go ahead and add up the digits to try 3 and 9 now. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 is equal to 3. 3 is a multiple of 3, so we can check that one off, but 3 is not a multiple of 9, so let's get rid of that one. For 6, 2 failed, so you can see that even though 3 worked, that means that 6 is going to fail. Okay, now finally checking for 7, if you double the 1, that's 2, then 11 minus the 2 is going to be 9, and so 9 is not a multiple of 7, so we can go ahead and cross that one out. Next one here we have is 56, so let's go ahead and say yes for 1. Okay, does it end in a 5 or a 0? No, so this 5 fails. Does it end in 0? No, so 10 fails. Now it does end in an even number, right? 6 is an even number, so we can check off 2. Now half of 50 is 25, and half of 6 is 3. 25 plus 3 is 28. Now is 8 still an even number? Yes, so that means 4 is going to work. Half of 28 should be 14. And so is this still an even number? The answer is yes, so we can go ahead and divide it by 2 again, so that's going to be 7. Okay. Next, we can go ahead and try our divisibility rules for 3 and 9, so just add 5 plus 6. 5 plus 6 is 11. 11 is not a multiple of 3, and 11 is not a multiple of 9, so those don't work. Now checking for 6, notice how this 2 works, but 3 does not, so that means that 6 is going to fail also. All right, and then for 7, let's go ahead and double the 6. If we double the 6, that's going to be 12. And then if we take 5 minus 12, well, 12 minus 5 is 7, so 5 minus 12 is negative 7. Negative 7 you can consider to be a multiple of 7, so negative multiples are okay as well. Hopefully you know 7 times 8 is 56, so this does work. Next number we have here is 105. Yes, it's divisible by 1. Now let's go ahead and check to see the last digit. The last digit here is a 5. So we can go ahead and say yes to this divisible by 5. It doesn't end in a 0 though, so we got to say no to 10. Sorry, 10. And then the last digit is odd. 5 is an odd number, so 2 fails, 4 fails, and 8 fails. Okay. We can add the digits, 1 plus 0 plus 5, and that's going to be 6. Is 6 a multiple of 3? Yes, it is. 3 and then 6, so 3 times 2 is 6. But 6 is not a multiple of 9, so we can't use the 9 here. It doesn't go in evenly. Now let's check 2 and 3. 2 fails, 3 doesn't fail, but that means that 6 is going to fail. Now for 7, let's go ahead and check this out. If we double that 5, that's going to be 10, and then 10 minus 10 is going to be 0. 0 is technically a multiple of 7 here. We can consider it because, again, when we think about multiples of 7, we can have like 7, 14, 21, 28, but if we go backwards, we go like 28, 21, 14, 7, 0, negative 7. So if we're just skip counting by 7, starting with 7, you can go in either direction, and we consider those multiples for 7 when we are thinking about our divisibility rules. Okay. Next, we have 240. 240 is divisible by 1. It ends with a 0 here, so that ends in, for 5 and 0, that's going to work, for 5 and 10 rather. So this is divisible by 5 because it ends in 0, and because it ends in 0, 10 has its first number that you can divide it by because it ends in a 0. Next, we're going to check our even numbers. It ends in 0, which is even, so you can divide it by 2. Half of 240 is going to be 120. And then this is still an even number, right? Because it ends in 0, so you can divide it by 4. Half of 120 is going to be 60. 60 is still an even number because you can divide it by 2 and get 30. So 2, 4, and 8 are all going to work. Now let's go ahead and check our 3 and our 9. So we have 2 plus 4 plus 0, and that's going to equal 6. 6 is a multiple of 3, but 6 is not a multiple of 9. If you notice here for checking for 6, well, 2 and 3 both work, so 6 is also going to work. And then for 7, multiply that 0 times 2, which is still 0. 24 minus 0 is still 24. 24 is not a multiple of 7. Next, we have this 252. That's divisible by 1 for sure. The last number is a 2, which is not a 5 or a 0, so 5 fails, 10 fails. Now let's check, it is ending in an even number, so you can divide it by 2. So what's half of 250? That's 125. Half of 2 is 1. So this will be 126. That's what half of 252 is. Now 6 is still an even number, so you can divide it by 2 again. Half of 120 is 60, and half of 6 is 3, so this will be 63. Now this is an odd number, so 8's going to fail. You can't take half of it again and get an even number, or a whole number, I mean. Next, we're going to go ahead and check 3 and 9. So 2 plus 5 plus 2. 2 plus 5 is 7. 7 plus 2 is going to be 9. So is 9 a multiple of 3? Yes. Is 9 a multiple of 9? Yes. Okay. Now, does 2 and 3 both work? 2 and 3 both work, which means 6 is also going to work here. Now for 7, what are we going to do? We're going to double the 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. 25 minus the 4 is going to be 21. Now 21 is a multiple of 7 because 3 times 7 is going to be 21. So we can go ahead and say yes to the 7 here. Next we have 360. 360 is divisible by 1. Check the last number here for 5 and 10. It's a 0. So if it's a 0, it's an automatic yes for 5 and 10. And we can go ahead and check our even numbers now. So it's a 0 ending in a 0, so we can divide it by 2. So half of 36 is 18, so half of 360 should be 180. It's still an even number, so you can take half again. That's going to end up being 90. And it's still an even number, so you can take half again. Half of 90 is 45. Checking for our 3 and 9, we have 3 plus 6 plus 0, so that's going to be 9 in total. That is divisible by 3, and it's divisible by 9. And checking for 6, 2 and 3 both work, which means 6 is also going to work. Checking for 7 now, if you double that 0, that's going to be still 0, and 36 minus 0 is still 36. Now think about, is 7 going into 36 evenly? We have 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, which is really close, but not quite 36, so not going to work for 7. Let's go ahead and check out this next one. It is 504. So yes, you can divide this by 1, right? But let's check the last number. This is a 4, so that's not 5 or 0, so 5 fails and 10 fails. Now the last number is even, so you can definitely divide it by 2. Now what's half of 500? That's 250, and half of 4 is 2, so this would be 252 if you divided it by 2. The last number is still even, so you can divide it by 2 again. Half of 250 is 125. Half of 2 is 1, so 125 plus 1 is 126. It's still an even number, so that means you can divide it by 2 again, so 8's going to work. Half of 120 is 60. Half of 6 is 3, so 60 plus 3 is 63. Okay, let's check our rules for 3 and 9. So 5 plus 0 plus 4 is going to be 9. That's a multiple of 3, and it's a multiple of 9. Now checking for our 6, well 2 and 3 both work, so that means 6 is also going to work out for us. Checking for 7 now, if you double this 4, 4 times 2 is going to be 8, and then 50 minus 8 is 42. And 42 is a multiple of 7, right? Because 7 times 6 is 42. We have 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and 42. So that means we can divide 504 by 7 evenly. Finally, we have 2,520. Yes, it's divisible by 1. What about 5 and 10? Well, if you take a look here, this last digit is a 0. So yes to 5 automatically, and yes to 10 automatically. All right. Now let's check our even numbers. Can we divide it by 2? Yes, because it ends in a 0, and 0 is an even number. And what we can do here next is take 2520. Half of 2,500 is going to be 1,250. Half of 20 is 10. So if we add those together, we're going to, well, first I'm going to say yes, you can divide it by 2. Half of this is going to be 1,260. Since it's still an even number, ends in 0, you can divide it by 4. Half of 1,200 is 600, and half of 60 is 30. So if we take half that, that's going to be 630. Still ends in a 0, so you can divide it by 2 again. So half of 600 is 300, half of 30 is 15. 300 plus 15 is going to be 315. So you wouldn't be able to divide this by 2 again, but it does work for 2, 4, and 8. Now the rule for this 3 and 9 is if you add up all the digits. So if you take 2 plus this 5 plus 2 plus 0, you notice here that we are going to get 9. So I'm going to write equals and put a 9 right underneath here, sneak it in. 9 is a multiple of 3 and 9 is a multiple of 9. Now let's check for 6. Well, 2 and 3 both work, so 6 is an automatic yes. Now for this final one for 7, I'm going to go ahead and write it out in detail. So if you're a little bit not sure of the rule up to this point, let's go ahead and try this whole thing together. So you take the last digit of 0 and then you double it. So 0 times 2 is still going to be 0. And so what you do here is you take the remaining number of 252 and you take away the 0, and that's still going to be 252, right? If you look at that and you're like, that's still a really big number, I have no idea. We'll take this 252 and repeat the process. Take the last digit of 2 and double it. That's going to be 4, okay? If you're ending up with 4 here, then you're going to have 25 minus 4, and that is going to be 21. Now, is that a multiple of 7? Again, you keep on going, but if we think about it, 3 times 7 is 21, so this is going to work here, right? So again, you take the last digit and then you double it and you take it away from the rest of the number, and you can keep repeating this until you get a small enough number. And if you just want to see if this actually does work, where you do this process of doubling the last digit and subtracting from it over and over again, I can show you here. 7's not going to go into this 2, but 7's going to go into 25 3 times, so 3 times 7 is 21. If you subtract this, 25 minus 21 is going to be 4, and you go ahead and bring down this 2, and that's going to be 42. Now 7 into 42 is going to be 6, so 6 times 7 is going to be exactly 42, and if you subtract, you're left with 0, and if you bring down this last 0, you're going to notice that we have 7 into 0, and 7 fits into 0 times. 0 times 7 is going to be 7, and you notice that we have a remainder of 0. So it turns out that 360 times 7 does get you 2,520. So there you have a few different practice problems of just practicing your divisibility rules. Hopefully you feel a little bit more comfortable and you know how they kind of piggyback off each other. Try to link up some of these. So keep in mind that when you're dealing with 1 is going to work for all of the numbers, okay? When you're dealing with 5 and 10, try to do those ones together. Just see if they end in 5 or 0. When you do 2, while you're at it, you should just do 4 and 8, right? Because they're even numbers. 2 can also control the 10 and control the 6. So if 2 fails, then all the even numbers are going to fail. When you're checking for 3, you might as well check for 9 as well. When you're checking for 6, just remember that 6 depends on this 3 and this 2, okay? And then when you're dealing with this 7 here, I would just deal with it last, but try to get used to doubling that last digit and then subtracting it from the rest of the number. And if that number is a multiple of 7, whether it's positive or negative, then it is going to work for 7. Okay, but 7's a prime number, and not a lot of numbers out there, or less frequent numbers, are divisible by 7. So just so you know. That just about wraps up this video on your divisibility rules. If you found the video helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And as always, keep up the great work, and I'll see you in the next one.